Greetings, and I trust you are doing well. I'm Stan Hustad, and I'm a longtime business performance coach, international broadcaster, and in many cases now a modern media mentor to people all around the world. And I produce a variety of spokesperson videos and online courses. And I believe for those of you who are writers, this is truly just for you. I remember the thrill when I finally wrote my first book. Now, I should have taken the advice of one other person, but I didn't. And that person said to me, Stan, write your first book before you're 35. And I still believe that that perhaps is true for many, many people, particularly for those in business and commerce, if they want to get what I call their DWI convictions. DWI convictions does not stand for driving while intoxicated or driving under the influence or drugs that have you under their influence. It stands for what you need to be convicted of from time to time. Demonstrated wisdom and insight. Demonstrated wisdom and insight. In the books you write, in the speeches you give, in the ways that you perform in your life and in your business, people can sense there's something about you that demonstrates wisdom and insight and truth. And perhaps wisdom, insight, and truth is what wit is all about. And not only is it wisdom, insight, and truth, perhaps there's a smile to it, a little bit of wit, cleverness. Not necessarily cuteness, but cleverness and something that makes people smile from time to time. All good marketing, in many ways, makes people smile. And in many cases, good writing also brings a smile to our face as we enjoy the story, even the stories that perhaps are a little bit tragic and tragicomedy. Oh, yeah. How do we get convicted of demonstrated wisdom and insight? Well, of course, one of the ways is to write a book. And it's been said that 83% of the population would like to write a book. You know, you go around and say, would you like to write a book? Oh, yeah, there's a novel inside of me. There's a story I'd like to tell. Well, of course, 83% of the population will never write a book. Most of them will never even come close to writing a book. However, if you're a serious writer, perhaps you have written a book. Perhaps you've written a number of books. Even perhaps you say, well, I'm still working on that first book or whatever it might be. And I remember again when I first wrote my book called You Make the Difference. And it was a book on what I called personal performance marketing. How to market you, because you have to market you before anybody will probably buy the stuff that you have, the things that you're selling. Sometimes if you're a writer or an author or a creative person, before they will buy the services or the trademarks or the craft that you have contributed and turned into a real thing, they'll have to buy you before they buy your book or before they begin to follow you or care about you or in some ways recommend you to others. You make the difference. So I wrote that book, and it's long out of print. This is the last copy, and because I wanted to do a revision of it, I went down and got myself a coiled version so I can study it and write it a little bit easier. That's a very good thing to do sometimes when you have a particular book that is helpful to you. It's easier to study it and mark it up and do the things that make it more worthwhile for you. But I want to suggest something new. There's going to be a lot of books in the future. However, there's going to be less than we might like. We are truly, in many cases, a post-literate generation. People are more inclined to do exactly what you're doing right now. Well, I'll watch it on YouTube. I'll watch a video. The audio book, that deal, is growing by leaps and bounds. I've done a lot of audio books for authors and helping perhaps bring their writing to emotional and experiential life. Now that's important. We can write very well, and most of you do, but it oftentimes takes the spoken word, the heard word, to give it an extra touch of wisdom, insight, and truth with emotion and expression and connection. As I used to say on late night radio, just let that sit on your head for a while. Here's my suggestion to many of you who would like to write a book. Don't write it. Perhaps you need to perform it. Now, what does that mean, to perform your book? I want you to think about it. Create and perform a book. What do you think that means? And would you take a few moments perhaps to talk about it? Well, I'm going to bother some of you right now because I'm going to challenge you. I have worked with a lot of writers and authors, and my daughter is an acknowledged writer and author and editor, world class. And you like to write, even though it is blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You want to sit down and type it out. Or if you, like me, you perhaps like to sit down and write it. And I write with a particular pen. I found out that Daniel Silva writes with a particular pencil that he likes, and I like that too. In fact, I used that black Murado pencil that he oftentimes suggested. I like to write on a graph sheet of paper. Somehow that allows me to sketch or perhaps give an illustration or a note of connection as I'm writing. So I like to write when I write. I enjoy it. And I have a routine for it. And I have, the things that I use and the tools and techniques that I use to do that. But most people can't do that. They don't have the discipline, or necessarily do they really find that will work for them. And so I'm going to suggest something else. Now, I've actually written 3 books in that they have been published. But let me say this to you. I've created possibly hundreds of books. Because what I've done in a variety of audio and video and teaching programs that are all there somewhere, and they can be taken down, they can be sent to a transcriber, and they can be transcribed, and then somebody who's really good could take that and they could be edited and turned into written prose, and I would have a book. Even though I did not write it, I did create it and I did perform it. And it was my words, my thoughts, my ideas, but then the wordsmith and the editor and the creator of the person who can do that better than I can do that will take my thoughts, my ramblings, my speakings, my creatings, and my performings, and turn it into that beautiful thing which we love to feel and sense and share with others, the book. And it will be around, thank goodness. However, what I'm going to challenge you to do is to think about the fact that you may not just be a writer and author, you're a communicator. And think about this suggestion. I've done hundreds of radio programs through my many years in broadcasting. And now I'm very much involved in what I call podcasting. Now, I wonder if you know where that term comes from. Well, actually, it comes from the word iPod, which many of you are familiar with. And what that was Stephen Jobs said, independent, individual, personal, on-demand music. So rather than listening to the radio station, or having to buy a CD that had all of the songs, whether I liked them or not. I could choose the music that I wanted to listen to, put it on this little thing called an iPod. And by the way, when he did that, the name of Apple was changed. Before that, it was called Apple Computer. But obviously, with the invention of the iPod, now it's just Apple. Because obviously, watches, phones, musical devices all came from that brilliant mind and that brilliant performance. So podcasting is personal on-demand broadcasting. And what it amounts to is something that anybody can do. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is to think about podcasting as a way to create your book. Speak it. Okay, you have chapter 1 outlined, or you have an idea. Talk it. Then perhaps put it on and see what the response is. Chapter 2, speak it, perform it, create it. There you have episode 2. Episode 3. While you're doing that, people are listening to your story. And podcasting is very, very much going back to the old radio time of story time. The serial story is very popular. And so perhaps that story or that novel that you have inside of you that you're trying to write it out, you may want to think about performing it. Podcast episode 1, 7, 8, 9, 10. Put it out there. See the response. Begin to build your following. What you will discover is people will respond to it. You may actually have a group of people who begin to follow you, and not only are they loving fans, they may be even gentle critics. They will make suggestions about your book. They will add particular episode stories that might help you with that book. One gentleman said by doing that, his book was 100%, maybe 1,000% better because people responded and they brought new information, new ideas, and new thoughts that he then incorporated into the final production, so that the podcast, when it truly was published as a printed work, was a far more superior work. And of course, it already had a following. I'm believing that perhaps the way books will be written in the future is they will not be written at all. And I would suggest that I would like to help you, that if you really have that book in you, you may want to actually perform it first. And you may need a coach, not a writing coach, a performing coach, a speaking coach, a person who can help you speak it with emotion, expression, and understanding, and how to turn it into episodes that are different and more unique than the standard chapters. Just a thought. Now, of course, right now, some of you are saying, Stan, this is something out of the Twilight Zone. I've never considered that. I don't know if that would work for me. Some of you are just resisting the whole idea. You want to keep writing. You want to keep typing. You want to keep scribbling and writing. And I know that feeling. I've got my own special pen and my own special pencils and my own pens that I actually have made myself that I write with. But perhaps you may say, it's not just the Twilight Zone. Perhaps it is somewhat the future that's upon us now as a communicator, as a performer, as a writer, that I will begin to turn or start to write my book as a podcast and then see what happens and see where it goes and find out the kinds of people who will jump onto my platform, onto my program, who will then be the people who write nice commendations and make a point of purchasing my publications. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Yes, it may be a bit of the Twilight Zone, but if you happen to go back to all of those old Twilight Zone stories, You will remember Rod Serling's great line, just an idea for your thought and consideration. And that's what I'm offering. For those of you who want to publish, those of you who want to write, those of you who want to put good books into the universe, maybe you want to start by creating a podcast, an audio first book, and see where it goes. Again, maybe from the Twilight Zone, but for your thought and consideration. I'm Stan Hustad, and you can reach me at stanhustad@gmail.com, stanhustad@gmail.com, and I would love someday to help you perform your book, and then won't it be fun to see it actually come out and be published? A performed, a published, and a profitable and successful work of art. All the best and blessings to you. Let me know if I can help you, and bye for now.